Goat versus fish. In the beginning, there was goat versus fish, the GoatFish. And goat versus fish said that there should be goat and that there should be fish. There is no alpha or omega. There is no black or white. There is no good or evil. There is only goat and fish. And goat versus fish. Welcome to the Goat vs. Fish podcast, recorded at the world-famous Comedy Store, Los Angeles, a place of Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish speaks to you now, speaks to you even now. You are part of Goat vs. Fish, forever Goat vs. Fish. And Goat vs. Fish is a part of you. You have many questions, yes? Who is Goat vs. Fish? What is goat versus fish? Why is goat versus fish? But there is only one question. Are you goat or are you fish? Ponder it now. A goat is a goat and a fish is a fish? A goat is not a fish and a fish is not a goat. You are goat or fish and fish or goat are you? This is Goat versus Fish. Kill Tony. Kill Tony. Goat vs. Fish was on the Kill Tony on the 253rd verses of Kill Tony, recorded at the Comedy Store, Los Angeles, yes? Goat vs. Fish suspects that perhaps you who listen, has come to the Goat vs. Fish podcast because you did hear Goat vs. Fish on the Kill Tony. Yes, the Kill Tony, as they say. This is for you. This is for you, the many killers of Tony. The killers of Tony. Let us recall the verses. Yes, there was one, Brian Redban, yes, who did make noises at Goat vs. Fish, yes. And there was one Doug Benson, yes, who did hold goat and fish and did make a verses, yes, did conduct a verses of goat and fish, and what a mighty verses it was, what a mighty verses it was. There was one Saul Vulcano, yes, who did imagine many things about goat versus fish and what goat versus fish does when it is not killing Tony, yes. It was pleasant for Goat vs. Fish. It was pleasant for Goat vs. Fish to speak to all the ones on the Kill Tony, yes? But it seems that not all the ones who did hear the word of Goat vs. Fish were pleased by it. They were not pleased by Goat vs. Fish. Many are this way when first they hear Goat vs. Fish. They say, what is this Goat vs. Fish? What is this one, they say, that is speaking of goat and fish, and all it speaks of is goat and fish and goat versus fish, and what is it? On the twit of one called Mac Wolfpit says, you truly make me grateful that cancer exists. Well, if Goat vs. Fish has made you grateful for anything, that does please Goat vs. Fish. That does please Goat vs. Fish. If you are grateful that cancer exists, then perhaps you would like to have more of it. Yes, you can have all the cancer you wish. You can have all the cancer you wish, yes. Be grateful for cancer and have it. Now, Goat vs. Fish does not know much about this cancer, yes, except that one said it was a fish and that it was very dangerous to verses. That verses in cancer could end a goat or a fish. But if you, one who is called Mac Wolfpit, yes, be you goat or fish, does wish to versus this cancer and is grateful for cancer, then you can have all the cancer you wish, yes. But if you ever do versus cancer, Goat versus Fish hopes that you do triumph, does hope that you triumph. Be strong, be you goat or fish. There was another one on the Twitterverse called Simon Robinson, yes, and it did say to Goat versus Fish, I want to see what I'm cringing at. Goat versus go fuck your mother. Goat versus Fish cannot believe what you have said to Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish cannot believe it. You have said this to Goat versus Fish without saying if your mother is a goat or a fish. Is your mother a goat or a fish? Goat versus Fish suspects that it is a fish because it is goat versus fish, not goat versus go fuck your mother, as this one does say, yes? And as for the going and fucking, yes? Well, you say go fuck. You say go fuck. Goat versus Fish. Go fuck. Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish will consider it. Yes, Goat versus Fish will consider it. But for now, why do you not do it yourself? Why not do it yourself? Why not go fuck yourself? Go fuck yourself. Why do you ask Goat versus Fish to go fuck your mother when you can go and fuck yourself? Surely you are not so lazy, a goat or a fish, that you cannot even go fuck yourself and ask Goat versus Fish to do it for you. Go fuck yourself. It comes from within you. It comes from within you, and it shall be a mighty versus. It shall be a mighty versus. And on the iTunes, perhaps where you are hearing the Goat vs. Fish podcast, yes? One called Cleveland Rewind, yes, left a review on the iTunes and says of Goat vs. Fish, funny? Is not. Now, some say Goat vs. Fish is funny. Some say Goat vs. Fish is not funny. Goat vs. Fish is here to help you to choose, But it is all Goat vs. Fish. Do you not see that it is all Goat vs. Fish? Goat vs. Fish has been called stupid, yes. Goat vs. Fish has been called genius, yes, but it is all Goat vs. Fish. It is all Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish would like to thank these ones, would like to thank all of these ones. After all the verses, if it were only goat or fish, but not fish or goat, it would not be Goat vs. Fish. It would not be Goat vs. Fish. It takes both the goat and the fish to make Goat vs. Fish. These ones have many things to say to Goat vs. Fish, and Goat vs. Fish will hear them, yes. You should hear Goat vs. Fish podcast verses 13, yes, the one with one Lou Hinkle. There you will find a fence-sitter that perhaps agrees with you, yes, perhaps agrees with you about Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish suspects that the Lou Hinkler has said many things to Goat vs. Fish that you wish to say to Goat vs. Fish yourself. Yes, you should listen, yes. And let us remember this verses again. Let us remember this verses. For even as the ones, the death squad, yes, as they called it, even as they dismissed Goat vs. Fish, even as they said to get off of the stage, yes, they did say, they could not help but ponder it. They could not help but ponder it. For soon after Goat vs. Fish was not killing Tony anymore, yes, they did ponder. Soon they were discussing who would triumph, the goat or the fish. One said that the fish would triumph, but then another, yes, it was the one, Tony Hinchcliffe, yes, did say that perhaps the goat would triumph, yes. It was Goat vs. Fish. They called back to Goat vs. Fish. And that is Goat vs. Fish. That is Goat vs. Fish. Even as you say there cannot be Goat vs. Fish, it is still Goat vs. Fish. It is still Goat vs. Fish. It was just after the one that was called Dave Yates was speaking, yes, that they did speak again of Goat vs. Fish. You can hear Goat vs. Fish killing Tony on the 253rd verses of Kill Tony, and that is on www.deathsquad.tv. The ones do say. On the audio, yes, if that is what it is, you can hear Goat vs. Fish at 3320. The verses of 3320, yes, if that is how you call it. And you can witness, you can see Goat vs. Fish killing Tony, yes, on the 253rd verses of Kill Tony, yes, on the Vimeo at 5027, as the ones do say. to one Saul Vilcano, one Doug Benson, one Pat Regan, one Josh Martin, one Joel Jimenez, one Jeremiah Watkins, one Tony Hinchcliffe. Is that the Tony that they do kill? Is that the Tony they do kill? Perhaps it is. One Brian Redban as well. All were part of Goat vs. Fish, that versus. All were part of Goat vs. Fish, and Goat vs. Fish thanks each and every one of them. Goat vs. Fish even remembers, perhaps it was a visage. Perhaps it was a visage of Goat vs. Fish. That one Kill Tony did on the Twitterver, did send a message to Goat vs. Fish, did show Goat vs. Fish to all the ones and ask them to ponder if they were goat or fish, but perhaps it was only a visage. Perhaps it was only a visage. Remember to follow Kill Tony at Kill Tony on the social media, yes? And do follow Goat vs. Fish. That's GoatVsFish on the Instagram, on the Book of Faces, and the Twitterver. And do continue to send your messages to Goat vs. Fish. Do send your messages to Goat vs. Fish. And now we sing in celebration of Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish, 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 Goat vs. Fish. And it was written, and it was written.